Civil wars are nasty, brutish affairs. Only through distance or extreme lengths of time are they romanticized. Mental images of two armies meeting out in the middle of a grassy field and politely taking shots at each other reflect a misunderstanding and arguably even a delusional understanding of what really happens when a nation falls apart. When House Steiner and House Davion joined together into the Federated Commonwealth, first with the Commonwealth Alliance in 3028 and then formally in 3055, considerable effort was put into meshing these two cultures and systems. The integration programs intensified following the War of 3039, and by 3041 the armed forces of the Federated Commonwealth officially merged the two military commands into one of the most powerful militaries in human history. However, under the surface, resentment, jealousy, and suspicion continued to fester. The story of the Sagittaire is inexorably tied to the FedCom civil war, as the Mech is designed and forged just as things start to fall apart. Though this 95-ton monster of a Mech would be temporarily sheltered from the brutality, it, like so much else, would be eventually pulled into the fray. Today we're going to look at history and machine in order to sort out why the Sagittaire has become one of the most terrifying battle mechs of the era. Like the assault guards themselves, the Horde was mostly made up of assault and heavy machines, and with the element of surprise firmly in his control, Bronson was certain he could take down the storied Fedrat unit. Just as he thought that, he saw a Sagittaire stupidly painted in red, white, and blue parade colors step out of the forest, the Atlas head emblem like a bullseye on the Mech's left chest. A tight smile stretched across his face as he stepped his Goliath forward and opened up with his Gauss rifle. The Crushers were about to find out that not all battles could be won by brute force. Some required cunning. Isle of the Blessed, page 283, by Stephen Mohan, Jr. After suffering an unexpected attack from the Draconis Combine in October of 3062, the citizens of Robinson were increasingly on edge and concerned that it was just the opening salvo of a more substantial conflict. It didn't take a leap of logic to assert that House Eadeh would take advantage of the growing civil discontent within the Federated Commonwealth by picking up some border worlds. Robinson was the regional capital of the Draconis March and would be an attractive trophy conquest. This matters to our story of the Sagittaire because Robinson's standard battleworks was based on the planet, and its leadership could plainly see the threats in front of them. By mid-3063, with small-scale fights breaking out across the Federated Commonwealth, Robinson's leadership sought to stay out of it and focus on producing material for a likely resumption of conflict with the Draconis Combine. So while the Sagittaire saw production by mid-3063, the battlemech was not quickly packed away on dropships and sent to hotspots in the early months and years of the Civil War. By November of 3062, it was obvious that there was no stopping what was coming. The Federated Commonwealth was doomed, and across its territory, units that had been deliberately constructed to contain a mixture of Lyran and Davion soldiers turned on each other. Lyran units, fantastically loyal to Catherine Steiner Davion, began to focus on quelling conflict within the Federated Commonwealth while ignoring Combine attacks in the Sky region, which only exacerbated the concerns of people on Robinson and other planets within Sky. The October attack in 3062 was particularly jarring for Robinson. Instead of a traditional raid or targeted strike against industry, the commercial dropship that landed in the heart of the city of Bueller quickly offloaded its payload of Combine battlemechs and launched empty. The Combine battlemechs that set foot on Robinson that day were operating with the knowledge that they would never leave. Their zealous mission was to cause as much damage as possible to the city and resources of House Davion. The Combine mechs fired on targets regardless of military or civilian nature. The Robinson Battle Academy suffered extensive damage, again, and hundreds of civilians were killed before the first Robinson Rangers along with the surviving Battle Academy cadre were able to cut down the Combine mechs. It needs to be noted for the record that the coordinator of the Draconis Combine denied having given the order for the attacks, but I'm not sure if that makes it better or worse. Regardless, the reaction from the Davions, specifically by Duke James Sandoval, threatened to further imperil the Federated Commonwealth. With civil war already rapidly developing, the last thing the realm needed was a war against the Draconis Combine. While Sandoval's motivations remain up for debate, it's understandable in the context that the threat from the Combine would be perceived as the more immediate issue. The brushfires across the Federated Commonwealth could wait. With widespread support further bolstered by the assassination of Duke Arthur Steiner Davion, Sandoval led the AFFS into an attack into the Combine in December of 3062. It was within this conflict where the brand new Sagittaire would cut its teeth. I wandered, unfeeling, back to my Sagittaire. Until now, the fighting seemed so distant. Jackson Davion had called in a lot of regiments to help drive the traitors off New Avalon, but judging by the number of inbound droppers, Victor had brought more. He was here, and we might very well be looking at the end of 4 years of fighting. Maybe the Archon ought to reconsider evacuating. The end of my 12th work hour left me tired as hell, but instead of going to bed, I went to 6. I found Furlough disconnecting about 1,000 wires and tubes from 021. We'd plugged in Ian's Vlar a few days prior and set it to charging and testing. There was more we could do to make sure it wouldn't explode, but at this point, who cares? We both knew the time had come. 021, Shrapnel number 21, page 139 and 140, by Lance Scarinci. When the Robinson Standard Battleworks design team laid out the plans for their brand new assault mech, they knew it had to set itself apart from the lumbering masses of armor and weapons that already filled the market. There had been widespread calls among FedCom mech warriors for an assault mech that was better attuned for close range or even point-blank conflict in urban environments. These calls intensified as the fires of civil war grew, and there were plenty of reports of knockdown, drag-out fights in cities and military bases where weapons with minimum ranges were hobbled. With all of this in mind, the designs for the SGT-8R Sagittaire reflected the best possible response. Constructed from a screw-heavy TRQ chassis wrapped around a Pitman 285 XL engine, the Sagittaire was not destined for chasing down targets. With a top speed of just 54 km per hour, the mech could fit along with most of its peers in the 90 to 100 ton weight bracket. With urban combat in mind, the design team knew they couldn't just move on, so the decision was made to install some massive Hildco LFT-9X jump jets to the battlemech, pushing the movement profile to 353. The unexpected agility of such a massive mech was sure to leave an impression in more ways than one. With a core of the battlemech sorted, you know once the extra bits like a cockpit and gyro added, the question of defense had to be tackled. With extensive review, reflection, and re-review, 18 tons of Starshield's special heavy standard plate armor was added in a uniquely sloped configuration. The outwardly menacing and predatory look for the Sagittaire was both deliberate and introduced a slight flaw to the design which made the cockpit slightly easier to breach. I guess this is why we can't have nice things. The last crucial details for the design team involved settling on a weapons loadout that could take advantage of the Federated Stalker targeting and tracking system that incorporated a targeting computer. With missiles long since ruled out, the entire weapons loadout would benefit from that improved targeting. Starting with the Sagittaire's only long-range weapon, a Defiance 1001 extended-range particle projection cannon was set into the battlemech's left torso. It could reach out to 23 hexes for its reliable 10 pinpoint damage without any minimum range. With the goal of creating a close-range brawler in mind, there was no dedicated mid-range weapons added. The next longest-range weapons were a pair of Magna 900P large pulse lasers put between the arms that could reach out to 10 hexes for their 9 damage per laser. It's worth noting, because there has been some debate in the past, yes, pulse lasers do benefit from the -1 accuracy boost from the targeting computer. That means any rolls with these pulse lasers have a combined -3 accuracy boost. At close range, the pulse lasers are going to be hitting far more than they're going to be missing. In addition to the LPLs, 5 Magma 600p medium pulse lasers were added to the mech, 2 split between the arms and the remaining 3 set into the right torso, center torso, and head. Both the head and the center torso MPLs were oriented to face the rear firing arc. This tracks with the era, as battle armor and vehicles, as well as rear-facing turrets, are all more common in 3060s urban firing environments. Finally, a Magma 200p small pulse laser was installed into the right arm, which technically doesn't make it an emotional support laser, but we all know it really wants to be one someday when it grows up. Of course, all of these energy weapons needed a little bit of cooling, so the remaining tonnage was spent on 17 double heat sinks. 10 were found in the engine, 7 additional tons worth scattered into every possible nook and cranny across the Sagittaire. I'm not joking, look at this. There's only 3 open locations, 2 in the legs and 1 in the left arm. Now we know why it wasn't given lower arm or hand actuators. While the Sagittaire 8R's damage at long and mid-range is pretty paltry, the short-range punch with high accuracy is difficult to dismiss. A possible alpha strike of 49 in the front firing arc in chunks of 6 to 10 would be difficult to survive over multiple hits, especially on a target that may have taken 1 or 2 ERPPC shots on the way in. Of course, the cost of firing all those energy weapons is substantial. The 34 cooling for the heat sinks is eclipsed by the 49 heat generated by a forward-facing alpha strike. A bright side of this plan, besides evaporating your target, is that there's no ammunition to accidentally cook off, so if you're all in on making sure a target ceases to exist right now, it could be worth it. Critics of the Sagittaire were quick to point out the risk of creating an urban city brawler assault mech with an extra light engine. Those engine criticals that extend the side torsos have to play into one's decision to go with such an expensive battle mech. Your TTS, the time till scrap math, is significantly altered. You want to know how I feel about the invasion of the Draconis Combine? I'll tell you in 2 words. Pretty damn good. Those cretin sons of bitches invaded our territory, our homes first. We're still cleaning up after the mess they left here on Bueller. How many people did they kill? 200 or 300? And for what? All they came here to do was to destroy. Excerpt from interview with Drang Sung, Robinson Senator from Bueller, January 5th, 3063. FedCom Civil War Sourcebook, page 43. The invasion of the Draconis Combine in December of 3062 focused on 4 planets in the initial phase. Al-Nair, Anting, Marduk, and Proserpina were all hit with near-complete surprise. Many of the planets on the border with the Davions had been stripped of their experienced personnel, who had been sent to reinforce DCMS forces on the border with Clan Ghostbear, so when Duke Sandoval landed, the AFFS units made quick work of the Green Defenders. The victory stacked up, and this emboldened Sandoval to continue his march deeper into Combine space. Faced with what seemed like endless amounts of bad news at home, the people of the Draconis March rallied in support of the invasion. By mid-3063, the first Sagittaires arrived to reinforce the units on the front lines. When a single lance of Sagittaires deployed on Proserpina, the surprisingly agile assault mech earned its keep by tempting the honor-bound samurai from the 9th Benjamin Regulars to accept challenges for one-on-one dueling rather than regular battle. This trick apparently worked 12 times, rendering a company of the Benjamin Regulars mechs into scrap. Reports filtered back to Robinson's Standard Battleworks, and it seemed that even with its flaws, the Mechwarriors appreciated having such a powerful mech nearby, ideally on their side. This is an important note because a directive went out for DCMS units to capture or salvage as many Sagittaires as possible so that the Combine could either replicate the design or take lessons from it for future mech projects. As is typically the case, those who encounter a battle mech primarily deployed by a single house or military organization will eventually see the practical use of fielding that design themselves. If you are waiting for lore-bound permission to paint your Sagittaire in a DCMS scheme, then, well, there you go. For fans of Catherine Steiner Davion, of which we all know there are many, don't worry because Duke Sandoval signed off on shipments of Sagittaires to Catherine's loyalist units, much to the horror of Davion-aligned forces who saw it as a betrayal. Thankfully, when James Sandoval was deposed by his son Tancred, it was the Davions' turn to see brand new Sagittaires joining their units. In fact, during the fighting on New Avalon, Sagittaires from each faction had the opportunity to fire at each other during the battle for the continental capital of Flensburg. As it turns out, smashing them together often resulted in both mechs ending up heavily damaged. Out of 2 lances of the battle mech that entered the fray, only 3 were still operational and able to walk out when the smoke cleared. For those who weren't keen on the Sagittaire's collection of pulse lasers, they only had to wait 11 years for the next official variant designated the SGT-9D. This 3074 refit retained the left torso-mounted ERPPC and right arm small pulse laser but pulled everything else. The arm-mounted large pulse lasers were replaced with twin LB-10X autocannons fed by 2 tons of ammunition on each side of the battle mech. Each of the medium pulse lasers were swapped for standard medium lasers, which traded away their accuracy and a little damage for a better range profile and half the weight. Finally, a C3 master computer was set into the right torso, replacing the targeting computer. Without as much need for cooling, the number of double heatsinks was dropped to just 13. The Sagittaire 9D is an interesting attempt at creating something with more of a mid-range punch and could network as part of a C3 system, but it came at the cost of making the side torsos even more vulnerable to rapid catastrophic disassembly events should the LB-10X ammunition suffer a critical hit. While it is true the opponent would have to chew through 30 points of armor to get there, the through-armor criticals are a thing and my luck is never really that good in such situations. Your mileage may vary. By 3084, things started to get weird with the SGT-10X variant, which incorporated several new pieces of technology for interesting effect. The first major changes included the shift to a light fusion engine instead of sticking with the extra light model. While the mech speed remained constant, there was 1 fewer engine critical on each side torso in exchange for half as much mass savings from the XL. The other major structural change was the installation of 5 improved jump jets into the machine, creating a Sagittaire with a 355 movement profile. Oh, joyous day. As far as weapons loadout goes, the stars of the show were a quad pack of medium variable speed pulse lasers. With 2 in the left torso, 1 in the right, and a 4th in the head, the medium VSP lasers can pack a good close-range punch, but we're talking extremely close range. The damage changes with distance, so at long range it's 5 damage per shot, medium range 7 damage, and only at 2 hexes and closer does the damage do its full 9. The only other weapons on the 10X were a pair of light particle projection cannons split between the arms, which could send their 5 damage out to 18 hexes. The 18 double heat sinks were stuffed into every nook and cranny of the mech to help deal with the heat generated by the energy weapons. A full Alpha Strike on the run generated 40 heat, which could leave the Sagittaire 4 into the red at turn's end. Not bad. At long range, the Alpha Strike could do 30 damage in 5-point chunks. At short range, the total possible damage would increase to 46, but you'd have to be 2 hexes or closer within the minimum range of those light PPCs, so the more realistic Alpha Strike damage is 36. In my totally non-professional and borderline unhinged opinion, you're not using the Sagittaire 10X because of its weaponry unless you're one of those VSP superfans who keeps showing up outside of my P.O. box with bags of Junior Mints. Keep them coming, by the way. If you like the 10X, you're more likely a fan of the improved mobility and survivability of the mech with a bunch of armor and improved jump jets. Otherwise, there are better variants. The next Sagittaire variant to grace the inner sphere with its presence was the SGT-14D, and it's a lot. There's a lot going on. Brace yourself, gird your loins, or otherwise prepare to be whelmed. Not overwhelmed, just whelmed. This 3134 variant once again carried a light fusion engine, but this time it was paired with an endocomposite frame along with the traditional 3 standard jump jets. In order to cram the C3 boosted slave computer into the mech's head, a small cockpit was installed. The last unique piece of equipment was a radical heatsink system. If you're unfamiliar with the radical heatsinks, think of them like mask but for keeping your mech cool instead of running fast. With an installed system, the 14 double heatsinks that the Sagittaire 14D carried could wick away an additional point of heat per heatsink if the system is triggered. However, much like the mask, repeated use has a tendency to cause damage to the system and additional heat rather than a reduction. For specifics, contact your local radical heatsink distributor or look in Field Manual 3145. As far as weaponry goes, I hope you're into exotic energy weapons because the 14D had most of them. Starting at longest range, the least strange example was an large laser set into the left torso. Then starting at 15 hexes, twin large re-engineered lasers were split between the arms, offering their 9 damage and potency out against unique armor types. Moving into close range, 3 medium variable speed pulse lasers were set into the arms, 2 into the left and 1 into the right. Finally, a medium X pulse laser in the right arm could hit out to 9 hexes for 6 damage with the -2 accuracy boost. It's an interesting collection of things that go zap, and I appreciate how it sticks to the original's theme of having a single powerful long-range weapon and a collection of short-range ones for a finishing punch. The prospect of doing up to 63 points of energy weapon damage, largely in 9-point chunks, is fun, though you do have to navigate the weapon inventory quite often to make sure you're firing the right thing at the right distance for the right damage. The heat generated in an alpha strike is a considerable 57, which is why you have that radical heatsink system when the time is right. So while I can see the value of the 14D on the battlefield, I'm so lazy as a BattleTech player that I don't see myself ever wanting to put in the effort. How's that for a glowing review? Good, but effort. Jerry Jameson tried to adjust to the experience of seeing his beloved Sagittaire go through its paces without him at the controls. Though some would argue the 95-ton assault mech was a shadow of the avatar of death it had once been in his grandfather's day, the Earth still trembled with its every step. Lack of funds, not neglect, had reduced the Sagittaire from what it had once been. The rare, invaluable, and difficult to maintain stalker targeting module had been traded away decades ago during the nadir of his father's career. Also gone were the extended range particle projection cannon and the 8 state-of-the-art pulse lasers. His father had not left the massive battlemech defenseless, of course. He had simply traded the high-ticket systems for needed supplies, including the more common, low-cost, and easily maintained weapons. Perhaps it did have to get a little closer to hit, and hit a little bit more often to do the same damage than it once had, but today his Sagittaire could stand up to fire that would have crippled it 70 years ago, and fire all weapons while riding its Hildco jump jets continuously with no fear of overheating. To Jerry, it was the perfect fighting machine, and its spirit, Lord of the Earth, had inspired the Juggernaut's name of his mercenary command. Wolf Hunters, page 255 and 256, by Kevin Killiany. Before we get into our last official configuration, we're going to make a stop on Galatea to meet with Jerry Jameson of Jameson's Juggernauts, a mercenary unit which grabbed some notability in the first half of the 32nd century. Before we get into the nitty-gritty on Jameson and his custom Sagittaire, I do want to offer fair warning that there will be some spoilers for events that take place in Wolf Hunter's Dark Age, the BattleTech novel. So if you are about to read a book that was first released in 2006 and don't want to know what happens, this is your chance to bail. Alright, now that one guy left, we can continue. Jameson's Juggernauts was started by Jerry Jameson's father, though we were introduced to the mercenary company on Galatea in 3135, as it was now run by Jerry and had hit hard times. Following a recent bad contract where the unit was used as a meat shield, Jameson was in a position where he had to rebuild and write more than a few letters to families of lost loved ones. The Merc unit's fortunes changed when he was approached by Star Commander Tal Sender, who initially proposed an alliance between the Juggernauts and Sender's refugee warriors from the fractured Steel Wolves. Anastasia Kerensky's shenanigans had resulted in a considerable number of clan warriors abandoning the clan and making their own way in the world. Tal Sender's crew amounted to a Nova consisting of 4 battlemechs, 2 Mithras light tanks, 10 elementals, and roughly 50 infantry with assorted light vehicles. Though initially hesitant to take on the warriors, largely due to the clash of cultures that would ensue, Jameson offered the wayward clanners contracts to join the Juggernauts. Jerry didn't waste time ordering the marked mines detonated. Moving at his full 54 kph, his Sagittaire led a broken field run through the painted circles. Behind him, the wedge opened up as individual pilots chose routes that looked best for them. As he cleared the last line of circles, an unexpected clang of metal on metal made him jump. A moment later, he realized he'd picked up a passenger as an elemental in battle armor swung past his cockpit on his way up to the Sagittaire's broad back. Or her way. Wolf Hunters, page 281, by Kevin Killiany. In the next year, 3136, Jameson's Juggernauts were serving out their first contract with the new combined forces on a planet with the very easy-to-pronounce name of Zeben-es Shamali, within the Carnwath Coalition. If you need a good neighborhood map, well, here you go. The description of Jerry Jameson's custom refit Sagittaire is shared in the context of him watching another Mechwarrior piloting it. The mercenary unit had adopted a cross-training regime where everyone was encouraged to train and learn how to be proficient in all of the Merc unit's weaponry. This included Mechwarriors learning how to function as ground pounder infantry, and vice versa. If you haven't read Wolf Hunters, it's a common theme across the separate units featured in the novel. To a somewhat eye-rolling degree, the discussion plays out at least 3 times between 3 different groups on how useful it is to know how everyone in the unit does their jobs. While very clearly a downgraded version of the BattleMech, the Jameson Sagittaire is a pretty cool mech, so let's see what it has for us. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details, there's no official record sheet for this variant, so there are some details such as heatsink placement which are open to interpretation. I pieced together my best guess at it for the purposes of the video, but the weapons should all be in the right spots and doing what they do best. Thankfully, the description in the book is good enough to get us to that point. The Sagittaire remains at the 353 movement profile and has 18 tons of standard armor, but has been pillaged of much of its high-tech bits like the extra light fusion engine and double heatsinks. Going with the standard, mass savings was sacrificed for frugality and ease of maintenance. For heat dissipation, 32 single heatsinks were scattered across the BattleMech. That leaves us with the weapons loadout, which gives the impression of a Succession Wars refit, though obviously this is a Dark Age project further down the timeline. The Sagittaire's primary long-range weapon was a standard particle projection cannon set into the left torso, paired with a standard large laser in the right arm. This 1-2 punch was further backed up at short range by 5 standard medium lasers, 3 placed in the left arm, 1 into the right arm, and 1 into the head. In a further nod to the original loadout, the head-mounted medium laser was oriented to fire in the rear firing arc. While obviously not as powerful as the original Sagittaire, the Jameson variant is a nice little bit of custom fluff for those who are waiting around in the late Republic era. In short, I just think it's kinda neat. Snapping the Sagittaire's torso left with the speed he loved, Jerry unleashed his portside weapons. 1 medium laser went wide, but the other 2 skewed the Buccaneer mid-line, while the eye-searing blue fire of the particle projector cannon washed its lower body with destruction. Temperatures in his cockpit shot from cool to hot as the fusion generator spiked. Lifting his damaged right leg, Jerry completed the turn. The Sagittaire pivoted with more grace than a 95-ton machine should possess to bring its full array of forward weapons to bear. Wolf Hunters, page 286, by Kevin Killiany. Since we're already knee-deep in the story here, the Jameson's Juggernauts were eventually sent down to the southern continent on Zeben Shamali to hunt down what was suspected to be an enclave of Word of Blake loyalists who had somehow survived the Purge so many decades ago. The mercenaries cut their teeth working together through some traps and mines, which suggests there was something to the rumors after all. Eventually, the Enclave was found, but 2 ancient battlemechs still piloted by Mechwarriors who were apparently very old fell quickly to the more modern and powerful mix of Intersphere and clan weaponry. When the smoke cleared, it appeared that yes, it was an old Word of Blake force that had settled on the planet and set up camp for the long haul, but from there things had fallen apart with infighting and the inability to survive over the extreme long term. It was a bit of a letdown for those expecting an exciting battle near the end of the story, but we can't always have what we want, can we? If you are interested in picking up Wolf Hunters, it's a decent BattleTech Dark Age novel. My favorite part of it is a rather well-constructed series of incidents that take place in space, which don't really have anything to do with battlemechs, but, space combat's fun. If you're super keen on big battles with lots of PPCs creating rivulets of armor, this book might be a little bit of a disappointment. Task Force Eruptio reclaimed the critical manufacturing infrastructure on Robinson when the world was liberated in 3149. Not long after that, an advanced new variant of the iconic Sagittaire, initially intended for the DCMS, took the field. IlClan Rec Guide, number 29. The return of so many long-held planets to the day beyond Fold offered new opportunities for bolstering the armed forces of the Federated Suns. This included the production lines on Robinson, which could once again be set to task of filling the ranks of the AFFS. Our newest and fanciest Sagittaire arrived in 3149, and it's bristling with laser goodness. Similar to the 14D, the 14R utilized a light fusion engine and an endo-composite frame. The armor remained at 18 tons, and the mech carried 17 clan-spec double heatsinks. The overall movement profile stood at 353, and thankfully the cockpit was also returned to a standard configuration. We all know how important legroom is on these long trips. For weaponry, the 14R is reminiscent of the original with a clan-spec extended-range particle projection cannon set into the left torso, backed up at comparatively shorter range by a collection of other lasers. In this case, the longest-range weapons include two large variable-speed pulse lasers split between the arms that could reach out to 15 hexes. Matching that distance were three clan-spec medium lasers, two split between the arms and the third set into the right torso. Finally, three clan-spec small pulse lasers were added, one in the right arm, one in the center torso, and an emotional support third was added to the head. Both the head and center torso mounted small pulse lasers were set to aim into the rear firing arc. Finally, all of these lasers in the PPC are aided with their accuracy thanks to a hefty 8-ton targeting computer in the right torso. The Sagittaire 14R makes a powerful case for being the battle mech in its ideal form. Though the endo composite and the light engine still represent vulnerability, it's not as scary as the Innersphere XL engine. The possible point-blank alpha strike damage for the 14R is 61 points of damage in that front firing arc in pretty hefty chunks. Surviving long enough to get through that 30 points of side torso armor is going to be challenging unless you're able to catch it out in the open from very far away. Before we talk about the Sagittaire's place at the dawn of the IlClan era, I definitely wanted to take a crack at creating my totally non-canon and unofficial Mechfrog variant. The headcanon for it is that Major General Oshiro Yamashita of the 2nd Avalon Hussars on Ingress received a Sagittaire 14R from a regular shipment of equipment and proceeded to modify it with gear procured from black market Capellan sources, resulting in a modified version of the battle mech that could sport twin plasma rifles. Structurally, the only change from the original 14R was the return to a standard structure. I know that's a pretty substantial shift for a refit, but it needed to happen to make the rest of the build possible, so Shazam, standard structure. Additionally, the 14MF carried 20 clan double heatsinks instead of the 14R's 17. A few must have been laying around after the Capellans and Wolf Empire clashed. Otherwise, the rest of the battle mech is the same, including the 18 tons of standard plate armor and the 353 movement profile. Moving on to the good stuff, as previously mentioned, the 14MF carries twin plasma rifles split between the arms, each with their own dedicated 2 tons of ammunition, 20 shots for the uninitiated. The 14R's clan spec ERPPC in the left torso was left in place. Next up, the clan spec ER medium lasers add their mid and short range damage in the same range profile as the plasma rifles, which is very nice. They're split between the arms, 1 in the left and 2 in the right. The clan small pulse laser in the head was left in place, still facing that rear firing arc. Finally, a flamer was installed into the right torso because it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. All the weaponry benefits from the right torso targeting computer, giving them a -1 accuracy boost. Heat generation for the Sagittaire 14MF could be wild, with a theoretical alpha strike scenario producing more than 50 heat while on the run. But with only 40 possible cooling in a turn, you'd have to really want to delete your target right now to take that risk. A more realistic turn could include the ERPPC, the 2 plasma rifles, and 1 of the ER mediums, until you closed further and swapped in the 3 ER mediums while leaving the ERPPC out of the mix, depending on if you need the 15 damage pinpoint or the more distributed 21 damage for the 3 ER mediums. Though I'm curious what you think about the viability of this monster. Would you take it into battle, or is it more of a parade glamour refit? If you'd like to take a closer look, or even run it on the tabletop, I've included a link to the record sheet in the video notes below. Check it out. So why do we love the Sagittaire? It's very likely that a lot of people got their first taste of the mech from the Eridani Light Horse mech box. Opening it up and seeing this rather dangerous-looking battle mech in among some classics probably sent more than a few people back to the TROs or Sarna looking for answers. The 3067 TRO is well past where many BattleTech fans tend to check out. The metrics for my own post-3055 mech videos are evidence of that. But the Sagittaire seems to have a pretty substantial built-in fan base due to its borderline unfair use of pulse lasers and the targeting computer in the original loadout. For a battle mech that is relatively new in comparison to the greats from the Succession Wars and the Clan Invasion, the Sagittaire has carved out a pretty solid niche as a FedCom Civil War brawler. Its connection to the lore is solid, and the loadout is great, and who doesn't like a big, stompy, jumpy assault mech? The future of the Sagittaire looks pretty bright. With the new variant being produced on Robinson for the resurgent House Davion, I hope we get to see the mech in some more upcoming lore. What do you think? Is the Sagittaire a mech you've added to your games, or is it a bit too cheesy for your friend group? Is there a variant that you think is the mech in its ideal form? Let me know in the comments and we'll keep the discussion going. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, hitting the like and subscribe buttons drastically increases your likelihood of seeing more of my nonsense in the future. Going one step further to become a channel member through YouTube or supporting through Ko-fi goes a long way to keep all this running a little bit longer. I really appreciate the opportunity to work on these videos for you each week. Thank you. With that, I'll say please take care and have a good week. Go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.